to the cartoon was inscribed, "For the best daddy ever." That was another reminder. I played Sarah Vaughan, Billie Holiday, and Bessie Smith tunes on our aging piano. The blues was having its sneaky, sad way with me lately. I'd been thinking about Jessie Flanagan. I could see her beautiful, haunting face sometimes when I stared off into the distance. I tried not to stare off into the distance too much. My two kids, Damon and Janelle, were sitting on the trusty, if slightly rickety, piano bench beside me. Janelle had her small arm wrapped across my back as far as it would stretch, which was about 1/3 of the way. She had a bag of gummy bears in her free hand. As always, she shared with her friends. I was slow-sucking a red gummy. She and Damon were whistling along with my piano playing, though for Janny, whistling is more like spitting to a certain pre-established rhythm. A battered copy of Green Eggs and Ham sat on top of the piano, vibrating to the beat. Both Janny and Damon knew I was having some trouble in my life lately, for the past few months, anyway. They were trying to cheer me up. We were playing and whistling the blues, soul, and a little fusion, but we were also laughing and carrying on, as children like us will. I loved these times with my kids more than I loved all the rest of my life put together, and I had been spending more and more time with them. The Kodak pictures of children always reminded me that my babies will be 7 and 5 years old only one time. I didn't plan to miss any of it. We were interrupted by the sound of heavy footsteps running up the wooden stairs of our back porch. The doorbell rang. 1, 2, 3 tinny rings. Whoever was out there was in a big hurry. "Ding dong, the witch is dead," Damon offered his inspirational thought for the moment. He was wearing wraparound shades, his impression of a cool dude. He was a cool little dude, actually. "No, the witch isn't," countered Janny. I'd recently noticed that she had become a staunch defender of her gender. "It might not be news about the witch," I said, with just the right timing and delivery. The kids laughed. They get most of my jokes, which is a frightening thought. Someone began to pound insistently against the doorframe, and my name was shouted in a plaintive and alarming way. God damn it, leave us be. We don't need anything plaintive or alarming in our lives right now. "Dr. Cross, please come, please! Dr. Cross!" The loud shouts continued. I didn't recognize the woman's voice, but privacy doesn't seem to count when your first name is Doctor. I held the kids down, my hands fastened onto the tops of their small heads. "I'm Dr. Cross, not you two. Just keep on humming and hold my place. I'll be right back." "I'll be back," said Damon in his best Terminator voice. I smiled at his joke. He is a second-grade wise guy already. I hurried to the back door, grabbing my service revolver on the way. This can be a bad neighborhood even for a cop, which I am. I peered out through the foggy and grimy window panes to see who was on our porch steps. I recognized the young woman. She lived in the Langley Projects. Rita Washington was a 23-year-old pipehead who prowled our streets like a gray ghost. Rita was smart, nice enough, but impressionable and weak. She had taken a very bad turn in her life, lost her looks, and now was probably doomed. I opened the door and felt a cold, wet gust of wind slap me against my face. There was a lot of blood on Rita's hands and wrists, and on the front of her green fake leather car coat. "Rita, what in hell happened to you?" I asked. I guessed that she'd been gut-shot or stabbed over some drugs. Please come with me." Rita Washington started to cough and sob at the same time. "It little Marcus Daniels," she said, and cried even louder. "He been stabbed. It be real bad. He call your name. He asked for you, Dr. Cross." "You stay there, kids. I'll be right back," I shouted over Rita Washington's hysterical cries. "Nana, please watch the kids," I yelled even louder. "Nana, I have to go out." I grabbed my coat and followed Rita Washington into the cold, teeming rain. I tried not to step on the bright red blood dripping like wet paint all over our porch steps. Chapter 2. I ran as fast as I could down 5th Street. I could feel my heart going whoomp, 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 and I was sweating profusely in spite of the nasty, steady cold spring rain. Blood was pounding furiously in my head. Every muscle and tendon in my body was straining, and my stomach clenched real hard. I held 11-year-old Marcus Daniels in my arms, clutched tightly against my chest. The little boy was bleeding badly. Rita Washington had found Marcus on the oily, darkened stairway leading to the basement in his building and had taken me to his crumpled body. I ran like the wind, crying inside, holding it back as I'd been taught to do on the job and most everywhere else. People who don't normally stare at much in Southeast were staring at me as I rumbled forward like a 10-axle semi on the loose in the inner city. I outpaced gypsy cabs, shouting at everybody to get out of my way. I passed ghost store after ghost store boarded up with dark, rotting plywood that was scrawled with graffiti. I ran over broken glass and rubble, Irish rose bottles and occasional dismal patches of weeds and loose dirt. This was our neighborhood, our share in the dream, our capital. I remembered a saying I'd heard about D.C. Stoop down and you'll get stepped on. Stand tall and you'll be shot at. As I ran, poor Marcus was throwing off blood like a soaking wet puppy dog shedding water. My neck and arms were on fire, and my muscles continued to strain. "Hold on, baby," I said to the little boy. "Hold on, baby," I prayed. Halfway there, Marcus cried out in a tiny voice, "Dr. Alex, man." That was all he said to me. I knew why. I knew a lot about little Marcus. I raced up the steep, freshly paved asphalt drive of St. Anthony's Hospital, St. Tony's Spaghetti House, as it's sometimes called in the projects. An EMS ambulance rolled past me, heading toward L Street. The driver wore a Chicago Bulls cap pulled sideways, its brim pointing strangely in my direction. Loud rap music blared from the van, and it must have been deafening inside. The driver and medic didn't stop, didn't seem to consider stopping. Life in Southeast goes like that sometimes. You can't stop for every murder or mugging that you come across on your daily rounds. I knew my way to St. Anthony's emergency room. I'd been there too many times. I shouldered open the familiar swinging glass door. It was stenciled emergency, but the letters were peeling away, and there were nail scratches on the glass. "We're here, Marcus. We're at the hospital," I whispered to the little boy. But he didn't hear me. He was unconscious now. "I need some help here! People, I need some help with this boy!" I shouted. The Pizza Hut delivery man would have gotten more attention. A bored-looking security guard glanced my way and gave me his practiced, flat-faced stare. A shabby stretcher clattered loudly down the halls of medicine. I saw nurses I knew, Annie Bell Waters and Tanya Haywood in particular. "Bring him right here." Annie Waters quickly cleared away once she sized up the situation. She didn't ask me any questions as she pushed other hospital workers and the walking wounded out of our path. We sailed past the reception desk with "Sign in here" in English, Spanish, and Korean. I smelled hospital antiseptic on everything. "Tried to cut his throat with a gravity knife. I think he nicked the carotid artery," I said as we rushed down a crowded puke-green corridor that was thick with faded signs. X-ray, trauma, cashier. We finally located a room about the size of a clothes closet. The young-looking doctor who rushed in told me to leave. "The boy's 11 years old," I said. "I'm staying right here. Both his wrists are cut. It's a suicide attempt." "Hold on, baby," I whispered to Marcus. "Just hold on, baby." Chapter 3. Click. Casanova popped the trunk latch of his car and peered into the wide, shiny wet eyes staring out at him. What a pity. What a waste, he thought as he looked down at her. "Peekaboo," he said. "I see you." He had fallen out of love with the 22-year-old college student tied up in the trunk. He was also angry at her. She had disobeyed the rules. She'd ruined the fantasy du jour. "You look like absolute hell," he said. Relatively speaking, of course. The young woman was gagged with wet cloths and couldn't answer back, but she glared at him. Her dark brown eyes showed fear and pain, but he could still see the stubbornness and spunk there. He took out his black carrying bag first, then he roughly lifted her 112 pounds out of the car. He made no effort to be gentle at this point. "You're welcome," he said as he put her down. "Forgotten our manners, have we?" Her legs were shaky, and she almost fell, but Casanova held her up easily with one hand. She had on dark green Wake Forest University running shorts, a white tank top, and brand-new Nike cross-training shoes. She was a typical spoiled college brat, he knew, but achingly beautiful. Her slender ankles were bound with a leather thong that stretched about 2.5 feet. Her hands were tied behind her back, also with a leather thong. "You can just walk ahead of me. Go straight unless I tell you otherwise." "Now walk," he ordered. "Move those long, lovely gams. Hut, hut, hut." They started through the dense woods that got even thicker as they moved slowly along. Thicker and darker. Creepier and creepier. He swung his black bag as if he were a child carrying a lunchbox. He loved the dark woods, always had. Casanova was tall and athletic, well-built and good-looking. He knew that he could have many women, but not the way he wanted them. Not like this. "I asked you to listen, didn't I? You wouldn't listen." He spoke in a soft, detached voice. "I told you the house rules, but you wanted to be a wise ass. So be a wise ass, reap the rewards." As the young woman struggled ahead, she became increasingly afraid, close to panic. The woods were even denser now, and the low-hanging branches clawed at her bare arms, leaving long scratches. She knew her captor's name, Casanova. He fancied himself a great lover, and in fact he could maintain an erection longer than any man she had ever known. He had always seemed rational and in control of himself, but she knew he had to be crazy. He certainly could act sane on occasion, though. Once you accepted a single premise of his, something he had said to her several times, man was born to hunt women. He had given her the rules of his house. He had clearly warned her to behave. She just hadn't listened. She'd been willful and stupid, and had made a huge tactical mistake. She tried not to think of what he was going to do to her out here in these bewildering Twilight Zone-type woods. It would surely give her a heart attack. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her break down and cry. If only he would ungag her. Her mouth was dry, and she was thirsty beyond belief. Perhaps she could actually talk her way out of this, of whatever it was that he had planned. She stopped walking and turned to face him. It was draw a line in the sand time. "You want to stop here? That's fine with me. I'm not going to let you talk, though. No last words, dear heart. No reprieve from the governor. You blew it big time. If we stop here, you may not like it. If you want to walk some more, that's fine, too. I just love these woods, don't you?" She had to talk to him, get through to him somehow, ask him why, maybe appeal to his intelligence. She tried to say his name, but only muffled sounds made it through the damp gag. He was self-assured and even calmer than usual. He walked with a cocky swagger. "I don't understand a word you're saying. Anyway, it wouldn't change a thing even if I did." He had on one of the weird masks that he always wore. This one was actually called a death mask, he'd told her, and it was used to reconstruct faces, usually at hospitals and morgues. The skin color of the death mask was almost perfect, and the detail was frighteningly realistic. The face he'd chosen was young and handsome, an all-American type. She wondered what he really looked like. Who in hell was he? Why did he wear masks? She would escape somehow, she told herself. Then she would get him locked up for 1,000 years. No death penalty. Let him suffer. "If that's your choice, fine," he said. And he suddenly kicked her feet out from under her. She fell down hard on her back. You die right here.